The third bullet didn't knock me down. The first one did. The second one made me stay. And the third one was a choice. I know what you're thinking. Nobody chooses to eat a bullet for a stranger's child. Nobody in non-slip shoes, carrying a tray of champagne flutes that cost more than her monthly rent, decides in the space of a single, shrieking heartbeat to become a human shield. Nobody invisible makes that kind of choice. But here's what they don't tell you about invisibility. After years of being looked through, something hardens inside you. Something that stops asking for permission. Something that just moves. And I moved. The Harrington Grand Mall on a Saturday afternoon was a study in beautiful noise. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars dripped golden light across Italian marble floors. Designer boutiques gleamed like jewel boxes behind their polished glass doors. Women in heels that cost a semester of tuition laughed at things that weren't funny, and men in suits checked their watches like time was a personal insult. I had been weaving through all of it for 6 hours. Mira. Trey. Smile. Invisible. My feet had stopped complaining somewhere around hour 4. That was the thing about this job. Your body eventually surrendered the argument. You just became a function. A green vest, a white shirt, a tight bun that pulled at your temples until you couldn't tell the headache from the hunger. Champagne, sir? Sparkling water, ma'am? I moved like a ghost between the gleaming people, and not one of them looked at my face. Not one of them, until him. I noticed the boy first. He was maybe 17, dressed in a tailored navy suit that fit him like a promise his father had made to the world. He stood at the entrance of the VIP corridor like he was bracing for something, those dark eyes scanning the crowd with an anxiety that didn't belong on a face that young. Every few seconds, he glanced back at the man behind him. Tall, immaculate, midnight blue suit, the kind of stillness that powerful men practice until it becomes a weapon. The father, the architect of the boy's fear, or the wall between him and it. I couldn't tell yet. What I could tell was that the boy's hands were shaking. I noticed that because I was trained to notice everything guests didn't say. A trembling glass. A darting eye. The moment a smile stopped reaching someone's face. Young's smile had never started. I told myself it wasn't my business. Loaded my tray. Turned away. That's when I saw the other one. He was dressed as a waiter. Same green vest. Same white shirt. Same careful, rehearsed neutrality. But his shoes were wrong. Every service worker in this building wore regulation non-slip soles. Practical, ugly, necessary. His shoes were matte black. Tactical. The kind that didn't squeak on marble because they were designed for something faster than carrying champagne. He was moving too deliberately through a crowd trained to drift. He was moving toward Young. And his right hand was drifting toward his jacket. Time did not slow down the way they say it does in movies. It didn't give me a gracious, cinematic pause to weigh my options. It compressed, crushed itself into a single, airless second. And in that second, I was already screaming. No, I don't remember dropping the tray. I remember the sound of it. Crystal and silver, and the gasps of 100 people who didn't understand yet what was happening in their beautiful, expensive afternoon. I remember throwing my arm out. Get back, get back, get back. I remember Young's eyes finding mine, wide and terrified and confused, and thinking, he's just a kid. And then the world went white. Not black. Not red. White like every nerve in my body fired at once and burned clean through. 1. 2. The third one I felt land like a verdict. I heard his voice before I lost consciousness. Not Young's. Not the screaming crowd. Not the security team that had materialized from every corner of the corridor like ghosts suddenly made solid. His voice. The father. Low and absolute, cutting through the chaos like a blade through silk. I couldn't make out the words. My ears were full of a sound like the ocean, rushing, distant, pulling me under. But I felt the marble beneath my cheek go warm. And I thought distantly, almost peacefully, they're never going to believe this at my second job. What I didn't know, what I couldn't know, bleeding out on a floor worth more than my entire life, was that the man in the midnight blue suit was Sir Tom. That his son was the single vulnerability in an empire built on ruthlessness and silence. That no one had ever moved to protect what was his. Not without being paid, not without being ordered. And that in 6 hours, I would wake up in a room I had never seen, in a bed I couldn't afford, with a man who ruled half the city sitting in a chair beside me, watching over a woman he didn't know, whose name tag he'd memorized before the ambulance doors had even closed. Mira. He'd read it out loud to someone, like it was a command, like it was the beginning of something neither of us had signed up for. He wasn't wrong. Subscribe to see how this unfolds, and comment where you're watching from. I would love to say hello to you, just to know how far our story is going. Blackheart. The trick to 6-hour shifts in non-slip shoes was never to stop moving. Mira had learned that in her first week at Harrington Grand. The moment you paused, the moment you let your weight settle into your heels and actually felt the marble beneath you, your feet remembered every hour they'd been carrying you, and they sent that information directly to your spine in the form of a complaint that lasted the rest of the shift. So she kept moving. Tray level. Shoulders back. Smile ready, not too wide, not too eager. The kind of smile that said I am here to serve you without saying I also have 2 other jobs and my mother's dialysis appointment is on Thursday and I haven't slept more than 5 hours in 4 days. The Harrington Grand's VIP corridor was in full event mode today. Some kind of private investor gathering. The kind where the champagne was French and the conversation was coded and nobody looked at the staff except to extend an empty glass in their general direction. Mira moved through the glittering crowd like water moving through stone. Efficient. Unnoticed. She paused near a marble pillar to rebalance her tray, shifting the weight off her left side where her shoulder had been aching since Tuesday. Around her, crystal chandeliers threw soft gold light across Italian marble, across diamonds and designer fabric and the easy, careless laughter of people for whom enough had never been a relevant concept. Mira's rent was 3 weeks late. She adjusted the tray, fixed the smile, and kept moving. Invisible. Just the way this world liked her. She was reaching for an empty flute near the corridor entrance when the energy in the room shifted. It was subtle. The way certain silences are subtle. The kind that spread outward from a single point like a stone dropped in still water. Conversations didn't stop. People didn't stare. But something in the atmosphere tightened, the way it does when someone walks into a room and the room instinctively understands that the architecture of power has just changed. Mira looked up. 2 figures had entered the VIP corridor from the private east entrance. Security flanked them. 4 men in dark suits who moved with the practiced stillness of people paid not to exist until they were needed. But it was the 2 at the center that pulled the eye. The man was perhaps mid-40s. Midnight blue bespoke suit, not a thread out of place. Korean, broad-shouldered, with the kind of groomed, absolute calm that didn't come from personality. It came from decades of being the most dangerous person in any room and knowing it. He moved like the corridor belonged to him. Because Mira suspected it probably did. The boy beside him was young. 17, maybe 18. A miniature mirror of the man. Navy suit, white shirt, the same sharp jaw. But where the father was a wall, the son was a window. And through that window, everything was visible. His eyes were terrified. Not anxious. Not nervous in the way rich kids sometimes got nervous at formal events. Terrified. The deep, specific terror of someone who has been told something they cannot unhear, who is standing in a public place trying very hard to look like they aren't watching every exit. Mira had seen that look before. She'd worn it herself, the night her younger brother had called her from the ER. She didn't mean to hold his gaze. But the boy's eyes swept the room in that scanning, hunted way and landed on hers. For just a second, something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. The strange, cross-world acknowledgement between 2 people who both know what it feels like to be afraid. Then Mira looked away. Not her business. She had champagne to deliver. She told herself that 3 more times before she believed it. She was near the service alcove, restocking her tray, when something snagged at the edge of her attention. A waiter, moving through the far side of the corridor. Green vest. White shirt. Same uniform she was wearing. He should have registered as background. One of her colleagues, navigating the crowd on a routine pass. Except, Mira's eyes dropped automatically, professionally. It was a habit she'd built from years of service work, from training herself to read the language of bodies in motion. And what she read in this man's body did not match the language of service. His shoes were wrong. Every member of the Harrington Grand floor staff wore the same regulation non-slip soles. Clunky, practical, aggressively unglamorous. The shoes this man wore were matte black. Low profile. The kind of sole designed for grip on surfaces you might need to move across quickly and silently. His tray was empty. His eyes were not moving the way a waiter's eyes moved, tracking guests, anticipating needs, reading the invisible social topography of a crowded room. His eyes were fixed, locked onto a single point with the kind of concentration that had nothing to do with champagne service. Mira followed his gaze. Young. The boy stood near his father's peripheral orbit, slightly separated from the main cluster of the security detail. Just far enough that there was a clear, unobstructed line from where the fake waiter was moving to where the boy was standing. The man's right hand drifted toward the inside of his jacket, and Myra's body made the decision before her mind finished forming the thought. She moved. Later, people would ask her what she was thinking. Journalists, detectives, a therapist she'd see exactly once before the new life swallowed the old routines entirely. They all wanted to understand the calculation. The moment where a woman in non-slip shoes decides that a stranger's child is worth the cost of her own body. There was no calculation. There was the boy's terrified face. There was the gun clearing the jacket. There was the distance between them, 12 feet, maybe less, and the absolute bone-level certainty that 12 feet was nothing if she moved right now. No! Her own voice sounded far away. Her tray hit the marble, a crash of crystal and silver that turned 100 heads in the wrong direction, buying her the single second she needed. She was already across the distance, already throwing her arm back in a hard, sweeping motion. Get behind me, get behind me. Young stumbled backward. His shoulder hit her palm. The first bullet hit her like a door slamming shut against her entire left side. The impact spun her slightly, and she registered the sensation the way you register extreme cold. With a delay, the body refusing to process what just happened. She didn't fall. The second one dropped her to one knee. This one she felt, a deep, tectonic wrongness spreading outward from somewhere below her shoulder blade. Her vision grayed at the edges. Around her, the corridor had erupted, screaming, the thunder of running feet, the barked commands of the security team finally in motion. Stay up, she thought. Just stay up. The third bullet hit like a verdict, like a period at the end of a sentence the world had been writing about her for years. This one took her legs. She went down hard, her cheek meeting the marble, the cold of the floor immediate and almost gentle against the heat spreading through her torso. Above her, she heard Young's voice, broken, raw, saying something in Korean she didn't understand. And then another voice, deeper, cutting through the chaos like it had absolute authority over it. That voice said her name. Not the waitress. Not someone call an ambulance. Not the panicked, impersonal language of crisis. It said Mira, reading it off her name tag, she would learn later, his eyes having dropped to it in the first second he reached her side. And it said it like a command issued to the universe. Stay. Sir Tom had a voice that did not ask. The paramedics would remember it for years. The way he stood over the woman bleeding on his floor and spoke to them not with panic, but with something colder and more absolute than panic. Something that left no room for procedure or protocol or the comfortable bureaucracy of emergency response. Her name is Mira, he said. You will use it. You will treat her like she is the only patient on this earth tonight, and if she does not walk out of a hospital in the condition she deserves, you will explain that outcome to me personally. One of the paramedics started to say something about standard intake procedures, about Jane Doe protocols, about the system, about forms. Sir Tom looked at him. The paramedic stopped talking. She is not a Jane Doe, Sir Tom said quietly. She is the woman who saved my son's life. You will remember that every single second you are treating her. Young was beside him, and for the first time all evening the terror in the boy's face had shifted into something else. Something raw and grief-adjacent, his eyes fixed on Myra's still form with the expression of someone watching a debt accumulate that they don't yet know how to repay. Sir Tom placed one hand briefly on his son's shoulder. Squeezed once. Then he got on the phone. By the time the ambulance reached the hospital, 3 specialists had been called in. A private room had been arranged. And somewhere across the city, the man in the black tactical shoes had made the catastrophic mistake of still being alive, in a world where Sir Tom's patience had just run out entirely. The first thing Mira registered was light. Soft, warm, directional. Not the aggressive fluorescence of a hospital ward, but something gentler, more deliberate. The kind of light that came from fixtures that cost more than she made in a month. The second thing she registered was silence. Not the silence of an empty room, but the weighted silence of a room with someone in it who was being very careful not to make noise. She turned her head, slowly, because her body filed an immediate formal objection, and found him. Sir Tom. Sitting in a chair beside her bed with the posture of a man accustomed to thrones, but currently making peace with ordinary furniture. His jacket was off. His tie was loosened by exactly half an inch, which Mira would later understand was the equivalent of complete dishevelment for a man like him. There were shadows under his eyes that spoke of hours rather than minutes. He was watching her the way people watch things they almost lost. "You're in the Harrington penthouse suite," he said before she could speak. His voice was measured, careful, the voice of someone rationing something. "The hospital released you into private care 48 hours ago. You've been unconscious for most of it." Mira processed this. Looked up at the ceiling. High, coffered, the kind that made you feel small in a luxurious way rather than a diminishing one. Looked at the foreline in her arm. Looked back at him. "Your son," she said. Her voice came out rougher than she expected. "Is he?" "He's fine." Something moved across Sir Tom's face. "Because of you." The silence that followed was full. "You didn't have to stay," Mira said finally. "No," Sir Tom agreed. "I didn't." He didn't explain why he had. And somehow, in the architecture of the silence he left behind, she understood that the explanation would come. But not yet. Not tonight. Tonight she was just alive. And he was just a man who had needed her to be. Young brought her soup the next morning. He appeared in the doorway of the penthouse suite holding a bowl with the careful, two-handed grip of someone who had been explicitly instructed not to spill it and was taking that instruction very seriously. He was still in his navy suit, or perhaps a different one that looked identical, and his expression was a complicated mixture of solemnity and the barely suppressed anxiety of a teenager who didn't know what to say but knew he needed to say something. He set the soup down, sat in the chair his father had vacated, and then looked at her with those dark, serious eyes and said simply, "Thank you for my life." Mira didn't know what to do with that. She said, "You don't have to thank me." "I know," Young said. "I'm doing it anyway." Sir Tom arrived an hour later. He carried himself differently in daylight, still immovable, still precise, but something about the penthouse's quiet seemed to allow for a version of him that was less fortress and more human. He sat, folded his hands, and then told her, with the directional efficiency of a man who did not believe in softening what needed to be said directly, that her apartment had been packed. Mira stared at him. "Your belongings are in storage," he said. "Your landlord has been compensated. Your remaining bills, all of them, have been settled. You can't just," she stopped. "Start it again. You had no right to." "No," he agreed simply. "I didn't." He held her gaze. "I did it anyway." The echo of Young's words hung in the air between them, and she realized distantly that these two, father and son, communicated in the same grammar. Acknowledgement and action. Guilt and stubbornness dressed up as grace. "What exactly," Mira said carefully, "do you think is happening here?" Sir Tom was quiet for a moment. "I think," he said, "that a woman who took 3 bullets for my son deserves not to return to a life that was already trying to kill her more slowly." He paused. "Beyond that, I don't know yet. But I would like the chance to find out." Mira looked at the ceiling, at the coffered plasterwork and the soft, expensive light, at the bowl of soup Young had brought her that was still steaming on the side table. She thought about her rent, her mother's dialysis, her non-slip shoes. "I want it on record," she said finally, "that I think this is insane." "Noted," said Sir Tom, and something at the corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but the blueprint of one. "If you're still with us, and I know you are, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We are just getting started with Mira and Sir Tom, and what comes next is going to change everything. Don't miss it." Physical therapy was, in Mira's assessment, a form of structured humiliation designed to reveal every limit your body had been quietly hiding from you. The therapist, a calm, relentlessly encouraging woman named Dr. Petra, came every morning at 9. She had the disposition of someone who had made peace with being the person who made other people hurt in productive ways. Mira respected her and resented her in approximately equal measure. The sessions happened in a large, light-filled room on the estate's second floor. Sir Tom had converted it in under 48 hours, equipment appearing as if assembled by quiet, efficient ghosts in the night. Mira had not been consulted. She had stopped being surprised by things she hadn't been consulted on. What surprised her was Young. Every morning, without fail, he was there. Not participating. He sat in a chair near the window with a book he rarely appeared to actually read, present in the particular way of someone who has decided that presence itself is the offering. When the exercises made her jaw clench with effort, he didn't flinch or look away. When she managed something new, the first day she made it across the room without the support rail, the day she climbed 4 stairs without stopping, he looked up from his not reading with an expression of quiet, genuine relief. "You don't have to watch this," she told him one morning, breathing hard after a particularly brutal set of shoulder rotations. "I know," Young said. She had started to recognize this as the family's defining characteristic. "Does it help?" he asked. "If I'm here." Mira considered lying. It would have been easier. "Yes," she said instead. Young nodded, looked back at his book, stayed. The meeting was held in a room that looked like a boardroom and functioned like a courtroom, and was actually, Mira understood, neither. It was a tribunal, and the man seated at the far end of the long obsidian table, a broad, silver-haired figure named Mr. Runn, who led a rival operation out of Boston with the genteel manner of a university chancellor and the instincts of something considerably less academic, was there to deliver a verdict. Sir Tom had asked her not to come. This was, in retrospect, probably the wrong thing to say to a woman who had spent 6 weeks relearning how to walk so that she could stand upright in exactly this kind of room. She came. She walked in slowly, cane in her right hand, spine straight, the ache in her shoulder a constant, familiar pressure she had learned to move through rather than around. Sir Tom looked at her from his seat at the table. His expression did not change, but something in his eyes did. Something that moved through surprise and landed somewhere that looked, very briefly, like awe. She sat beside him. Mr. Wren watched all of this with the attentive stillness of a man calibrating a new variable. Then he said pleasantly, "I wasn't aware you'd be bringing staff, Tom." Mira looked at him. She had spent her whole life being invisible. She had spent 6 weeks in physical therapy learning that her body, despite everything, still belonged to her. She had taken 3 bullets for a child she didn't know, and she had lived, and she had walked into this room on her own 2 feet, and she was done, finished at a cellular level, with being looked through. "I'm not staff," she said. Her voice came out level and clear in the quiet room. "I'm the reason his son is alive, which means I'm the reason this conversation is even happening, because if Young had died, there would be no negotiating table. There would only be consequences." She held Mr. Wren's gaze. "So I'd suggest we all remember what's actually at stake here before anyone decides to be dismissive about who's in the room." The silence that followed was the kind that changes the temperature. Mr. Wren looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Sir Tom. Sir Tom said nothing. He didn't need to. The expression on his face said everything. Mr. Wren picked up his pen, looked down at the papers in front of him, and said quietly, "Let's begin." Sir Tom found her on the terrace afterward. The city spread out below them in its nighttime configuration. Lights and motion, and the distant sound of traffic that never fully stopped, even at this hour. Mira stood at the railing with her cane hooked over her forearm, the weight off it, her face turned toward the skyline. She heard him come out. Didn't turn. He stood beside her for a moment in the particular silence that had become its own kind of language between them over the past weeks. "You didn't have to do that," he said finally. "I know," Mira said. She felt rather than saw the movement at the corner of his mouth. "I had an arrangement in mind," he said, "when I brought you here. Something formal. Structured. An exchange that would account for what you'd done and provide you with stability. Security. The things your old life wasn't giving you." "I know," she said again. "I'm voiding it." She turned then. Found him looking at her with an expression she hadn't seen on his face before. Not the controlled authority, not the careful precision. Something without armor in it. something that had been working up to this for weeks and had finally decided that silence was no longer sufficient. The arrangement made sense, he said, when I thought I understood what this was. But I don't think I understood what this was. Mira studied him. What is it? Sir Tom was quiet for a moment. Not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of a man choosing words the way a surgeon chooses instruments. Carefully, because the wrong one causes damage. You walked into that room today, he said, in pain without being asked, and you changed the outcome. Not because you owed me anything. Not because of any arrangement. He paused. I have had many people in my life who were loyal because of what I could give them. I have never had someone who simply, another pause, shorter, like the word cost him something. Stayed. Mira was quiet. Young calls you Nuna, Sir Tom said. Did you know that? It means. I know what it means, she said softly. He looked at her. I'm not asking you to fill a role, Mira. I'm asking if you want to build something real. With us. A beat. With me. The city hummed below them. The ache in her shoulder was a distant, manageable thing. Somewhere inside the estate, she knew, Young was probably pretending to read a book he wasn't reading, waiting to hear how this ended. Mira looked at Sir Tom, this immovable, fortress-built man who had sat beside her bed for hours and called her name like a command and voided every clean, transactional arrangement, because apparently neither of them were capable of keeping this simple. If we do this, she said, I need you to understand something. Tell me. I don't disappear, she said. Not for anyone. Not anymore. Sir Tom held her gaze. And this time, the blueprint of a smile became the real thing. Good, he said quietly. I don't want you to. And that's where we leave them, standing on the edge of something neither of them planned, but both of them chose. Mira, who started invisible and became invincible. Sir Tom, who had everything except the one thing that actually mattered. And Young, who is absolutely still pretending to read that book. And just like that, a woman who once made herself small enough to disappear through a crowd with a tray of champagne is now standing at the top of the world she once served. Mira didn't ask for this life. She just refused to let a child die in it. And that one split-second decision made in non-slip shoes on a marble floor, changed everything. That's what this story is really about. Not the bullets. Not the mansion. Not even Sir Tom and that almost smile that took 10 chapters to arrive. It's about what happens when an invisible woman finally lets the world see her. And chooses, deliberately, painfully, beautifully, not to shrink back down. If Mira's story hit different for you today, do me a favor right now. Hit that like button, because it tells us that stories like this matter. And if you haven't subscribed yet, tap that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Because the next story we're bringing you is going to pull at something even deeper. Drop a comment below and tell me. Backhand index pointing down, were you Team Mira from the beginning? Or did Sir Tom win you over somewhere along the way? I read every single comment. Every one. And I will find yours and say hello, because you took the time to travel this story with us, and that means everything. Until the next chapter, stay seen, stay stand.